It's my pleasure to call to order tonight's regular meeting of the Richardson Bay Regional Agency for Thursday, March 13th. Madam Clerk, could you call roll, please?
Vice Chair Ryan,
Here.
Director Burke,
Here.
Director Moulton Peters, Director Karapiet. Here.
Thank you. So we'll start out with an opportunity for the public to make comments on items that aren't on tonight's agenda. First, we'll start with the people in the chambers, and then we'll move to people online. And Madam Clerk, could you give directions to people online? And sorry to do this unilaterally, but can we give 5 minutes tonight to each speaker? I've had a request from the public.
Okay. The RBRA encourages that comments be submitted in advance of the meeting. Those members of the public using the Zoom video conference function who wish to comment on an agenda item for public comment may click on raise hand when that item is underway. Those members of the public attending by telephone who wish to comment should press *9 on their keypad, and once recognized, *6 for mute unmute. The clerk will unmute the speakers one at a time at the appropriate time for public comments. Comments are limited to 5 minutes this evening.
Thank you. And as your turn comes up, if you could just speak into the microphone, introduce yourself, and then give me your comment, that'd be great.
Is this a good position?
You're welcome to sit if you'd like. Yeah.
Is it better to sit down?
It's more comfortable and you can speak right into the microphone. Yeah. Thanks.
And I need to turn it on?
No, it's on.
Oh, okay.
Ready to rock.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Tab Mitchell, and I arrived in Marin County in 1996. And I've been a member of the anchor out community. We use that term loosely because I didn't hang out with a whole lot of people, but I have been an anchor out since 1996. And I'm on my sailboat right now, which is a sailboat from 1962. And I worked in the shipyard, so it was just natural that I would go ahead and buy a broken boat and fix it for a home. And my lifestyle basically provided that for me. So I built a home. 12 years ago, I bought this 50-foot sailboat that I live on now. And 11 years ago, I acquired a 800-pound mooring. I dredged it up from the bottom of the bay. And so that's basically an introduction, just really quickly. Now I have 3 points I want to cover just really quick. So I'll try to speak as curtly as I can. First of all, I am somewhat shocked and surprised at your choice of meeting place. I love Tiburon, so please take no offense. But Sausalito has 5 haul out facilities, 7 yacht harbors, numerous houseboat communities, people living along the waterfront and living on the mountainside. And it just seems like your public meeting should be in Sausalito City Hall. And it is suspect to me that we have 54 homes on a lee shore. People consciously built $1 million homes on a lee shore and are complaining that things wash up on their beach. Because, I mean, that's the nature of a lee shore. It does allude to perhaps who's paying the bills and who wants the control of Richardson Bay. I have here a flyer that was given to me at 3-month notice. I made some copies. But this flyer represents, you know, the controlled area on the bay and whatnot. And apparently Tiburon and Belvedere is not affected by any action whatsoever taken on Richardson Bay. Now we do have the estuary for the birds. What's that called again? The Audubon. Thank you so much. Very great group of people, by the way, but staying on point. It just seems that the heavy-handed issues that are taking place on Richardson Bay are unequally being managed. I mean, the heaviest hand is on the Sausalito side. And we still don't have meetings like this nature in Sausalito City Hall. And over the years, I've made many friends, and we've all been getting older together. And it is surprising how many people live on the waterfront in Sausalito and really have over the years kept track of the anchor outs and cared for us and that kind of issue. But so I just kind of bring up the question. And as far as topic number one, I'm just going to let it go because it's a mystery. Topic number two is about the eelgrass. And so we can talk a little bit about science here because science is a beautiful thing and it's also a very basic thing. And so it starts out with careful observations. And then it goes into honest and reliable reporting of what was observed. And then why on earth do any of this at all? If it's not that mankind could try to make life-enhancing choices for his environment and for himself. So 9/11 happened. 2001, it's been 24 years. So we were attacked in Manhattan, we were attacked in Washington, D.C., and we lost a plane in Pennsylvania. And somehow in the fray of this situation, our water treatment facilities decided that there was a presumed type of terrorist threat. It hadn't happened, but it was presumed that there was a threat. And so with that thought in mind, they decided to add ammonium sulfate to our drinking water. Ammonium sulfate is a permanent chemical. It doesn't biodegrade. Bleach, chlorine bleach, after exposed to sunlight for a period of time, it biodegrades into inert properties. But ammonium sulfate's not true. It builds up in our bodies and it builds up in the environment. And that's what we're seeing out here on this bay. We have 3 treatment facilities on Richardson Bay. We have Sausalito, Mill Valley, and we have Blackie's Pasture. And so on all 3 corners of Richardson Bay, we're looking at a minute chemical being added in large quantities. And it's being added in a way that I'd say, and I say it very carefully, but I think our water treatment facilities are managing themselves. There's no overseer of them in the sense that you cannot add more ammonium sulfate or less. And believe you me, if you're sitting in the bathtub and you can smell ammonium sulfate in the water, that's not a small amount of chemical. So we could look at the estuary back here in Mill Valley because it's the least of circulating on the bay. It's just water going out, water coming back in. I think the largest amount of water put into the bay at that point is the treatment facility because the creek is very small. I've heard stories about this back bay and that it used to be so choked with life, seaweed and eelgrass that you could barely paddle through this area. And today, if we walked over to that estuary bridge on the highway and walked over there and looked down into the water, we would notice that there is not one plant in that area.
I don't want to cut you off, but if you could make sure you get to your points quickly because we've
Right.
over.
Thank you very much. I can run on. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up with point 2 and then we can get in point 3 and I'll just be done with this because it's been on my mind for quite a while. If we lose our plant life on Richardson Bay, we're going to lose our small fish. If we lose our small fish, we're going to lose our large fish. We're talking about San Francisco mackerel, herring, crab, the tiger sharks. They're all dependent on plant life. And after 24 years of a minute chemical like ammonium sulfate being added to our drinking water, I think we should wise up and start looking at the solution for the acidification of our little bay here. And we should do a very nice plotted out survey of the bay and find out where it's poisoned and what it's poisoned with, if we intend to save the eelgrass. If it's ammonium sulfate and it's been building up for 24 years on our bay, there's a chance that we're already over the red line. If the chemical has built up over that period of time, will it continue to affect them for the next 3 years? Will it get worse, worse, and worse? Well, it's not getting better. Okay, my third topic is, may I give you one of these? This is a copy. A 30-day notice that I was given. And on that, you'll see that I have my longitude and latitude placed. And that shows my exact position on the red side of the canal. On this particular chart, it also has two red lines. One red line represents from tower to tower. The second red line represents the sloughing zone. So when we dredge out the main part of the canal, and then the sloughing zone's on the side. So they scoop that out at an angle so that it doesn't slough back into the channel. So this sloughing zone is 50 yards wide, it's 150 feet, and my boat is 50 feet plus about 30 feet of scope. So I'm out of that anchoring zone. I'm out of the eelgrass zone by some 80 feet at the minimum point. Secondly, the RBRA and the BCDC came up with an agreement. It's here, it's probably over there. Came up with an agreement, and on one of the stipulations was that a pre-existing mooring is excluded from elimination. So even though I'm outside of that zone and I'm legally anchored as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, and I'm in compliance with the RBRA agreement and the BCDC, I am still getting $1,000 tickets and not getting them on my boat anymore. I'm getting them in the mail, which is just fine. But I'm not doing anything wrong. And I have strived to live a private, sober, introspective life. And I'm brought before you to declare myself, essentially, which is, it's a challenge, of course. And I guess it works out for the better in the long run anyway. But
Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
I need to wrap this up in the sense
Okay.
of saying that I'm out of your way. And I don't appreciate the encouraged tickets and stuff for the frustrational level in life. It's already tough enough on me. I don't really need any more stuff. I did choose a particular way of life that is not exactly the norm, you know, and I was transient most of my adult life. And then I landed in Sausalito. I didn't know it was home, but I've stayed here a lot longer than I ever thought I would. And so, you know, there was an offer of welfare housing, and it was very unappealing to me because I longed to live on my boat. And I have to ask myself about my own sanity. What a crazy way to live, you know? At any point, I could fall off my boat and just float away. It's a problem. So welfare housing was not okay for me. And so I have no other destination in life. I have no other place to go. And I have enough money to live for the next 5 years without really worrying about it too much, but I don't have enough money to go. So if you want me to get off the bay, you're going to have to pay me. The United States Supreme Court ruled on the 5th and 15th Amendment on April 15th of 2023 concerning the 5th and 15th Amendment on private property rights, and that includes my mooring. My mooring is well maintained, and it's good for the next 5 years with little service. And then also, I value that at about $2,000 a month if I was going to be paying rent, putting my boat in the harbor or putting it on a mooring. So my point being is that it would cost me $120,000 to leave this community. And that's the real value of my property. My boat is separate from that. So if you want me to leave, and according to the Supreme Court and this 5th and 15th Amendment stating that, you know, Caltrans and California state parks, they can assume private property for public use, but they have to do two things. They have to give due process, and they have to pay proper compensation for the property. And I've stated the value of that property. Mind you, Marin County is going to take a third of that money if anybody pays me anything for my mooring. So I've been paying my taxes. I'm a homeowner in Marin County. I got a first-time homeowner's tax break, and that's for my sailboat. And I've been paying that for 11 years to Marin County. So what I'm saying is this is my home, and I can't really go any other place. I have no other place to go, and I'm getting these ridiculous tickets, and
So at this point, though, I'd love to have you follow up with an email to all of us if you
Okay.
can, because that way we can pursue this. That would be the best. And we've been generous with the time, and
I
it's not-
understand, yes,
and any more level of detail isn't going to help us solve this tonight. So
right.
I thank you for your comments. You're welcome to stay around and talk to us afterwards if you want.
No, I really appreciate you giving me the time to speak, and I hope this all works out okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
You know, it does bear mention again, we lose the eelgrass and that biosphere, we're in the heap of trouble.
Is there anyone else in the chambers who'd like to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda? Is there anyone online who'd like to speak? Okay, so I'll close the public comment period now. We're moving on to item 3, and if it's okay with my colleagues, I'd like to table that until the next meeting. It seems as though I'm current vice chair and acting chair tonight. It would save us some two-step of just administrative weariness if we could just table this till the next meeting. So,
I can make that motion.
do we need a motion, do you know, or can I just table it? Okay, let's have a motion to table item 3.
Okay, I'll make the motion
Thank
to
you.
table item 3.
Second?
And then all in favor of tabling item 3? So-
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that passes 4-0. Thanks. Director Carrier. Now we move to item 4, and we start with the Executive Director Staff Report. Is he still on the line? All
Well,
right.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right now. I'm sorry for the confusion at the beginning, and I appreciate everybody's consideration in letting me do this remotely. I just had something that took me away. I couldn't avoid it. I'm going to keep my camera off while I'm presenting, just to ensure that we don't have any problems with my Wi-Fi signal. And I'll come back on after I'm done if there's any questions. I'm going to go into the Executive Director's Report, reporting period January 3rd, 2025, February 28th, 2025. For the new board members, I know we've been to a couple of meetings already together, but I don't go over everything, just the important, what I think are important or different. Under fiscal, we'll have the mid-year budget review later in this meeting, and the preliminary budget report also is completed. We've begun discussions regarding future state funding opportunities. Under BCDC, I prepared with staff's assistance a PowerPoint presentation to BCDC Enforcement Committee, which was scheduled to be on the 12th and was since canceled and has been rescheduled to April 9th. That's not in my report. I'm just adding that. The presentation covers 6 months of activity, and since it covers already presented information to this board that we presented to this board, staff will not be presenting to this board, but it will be available on our website after the presentation of the BCDC. But I did attach the closing slide. It's an attachment to this report that depicts all of the vessel and housing activities covered in the presentation in graph form. Under housing, we're happy to say we now have 22 people housed, 23 vouchers, 18 current, and 3 transition to federal housing choice programs. 2 people are in housing searches. Program expiration letters have been provided. That's the letter that advises the elimination of the funding, and the next, which is their step to a HCV, a housing choice voucher. With that said, you know, with everything that's happening with the federal government right now, all of those vouchers are on hold, but we are fortunately able to maintain the payments for all of the support that we're providing right now. Under vessel buyback, 2 vessels were turned in. Harbor Master Malcolm will go over that more in his report. Under eelgrass, the next restoration effort is planned for spring of 2025, and marine debris removal is planned for the summer of 2025. Under Sausalito, we've been working with Coastal Policy Solutions and the city staff for an eelgrass signage on city property. It's going to go at the top of Turney Street. Under grants, 1 new grant final application was submitted during this reporting period to support the vessel buyback program, the removal of abandoned and derelict vessels, and the removal of underwater debris from Richardson Bay. Notification of the 2 grant submittals. Remember, we had another grant submittal last reporting period, but the notification for the 2 grant submittals is expected mid-2025. Under general, Harbor Master Malcolm Board Clerk Karen Prowse working with County Council. We continue to work on our Public Records Act request. The level of attention has remained steady. We had 2 PRAs received this period, and 2 responses were provided. And a new item that I added to the report, you know, we have we have a submittal form via the website. And I thought I would start reporting on how many inquiries we get through the website. And this reporting period, there were 16 inquiries submitted via the website. 14 of those submittals were inquiries regarding the vessel turn-in program. And that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Director Gross. Do we have any questions or comments for Director Gross? No? Okay, thank you. So can we move on to the Harbor Master's report, please?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. This is the Harbor Master's report for the meeting of March 13th. Period covered for this report will be December 30th, 2024 to February 28th, 2025. For vessel metrics, we have 12 vessels on Richardson Bay qualified for the housing program not yet engaged, 2 vessels in the safe and seaworthy program that are qualified for housing, 1 transient vessel, 1 vessel with a valid 30-day permit, and 1 vessel with a 30-day permit in violation. This brings our grand total vessels on Richardson Bay to 17. As a side note to this, 1 vessel within the last week has been removed from the anchorage, so the actual number of vessels is 16. We have 9 vessels under enforcement action, 9 vessels within the designated anchorage, and 8 vessels in the eelgrass protection zone. That number will actually be 7 because the vessel that was recovered was within the eelgrass protection zone. For significant events on February 13th, 2025, 41-foot motor vessel Ahi Mahi broke free from its anchor position on Richardson Bay and alighted with a deck behind a home in Belvedere. Staff received notification from the Belvedere Police Department and immediately went to the home to assess the situation. The vessel was behind the home, wedged under the deck, sustaining substantial damage due to its proximity to the deck and a vessel hoisting system. A summary abatement was requested and obtained from agency counsel. The vessel was removed from the home and brought to the Army Corps of Engineers debris yard. The vessel owner was eventually located, retrieved all of his personal belongings from the vessel, and the vessel was disposed of. A development as of yesterday, the resident of that vessel has been put in touch with our housing outreach caseworker, and they are requesting housing. They are qualified for it. 4 other vessels were removed from the anchorage this period. 2 of the vessels were removed through efforts of the RBRA Temporary Housing Voucher Program and Vessel Buyback Program. For the citation program, 5 citations were issued this period. All citations were issued for violation of Section 3.04.010 of the RBRA Code, anchoring greater than 72 hours. 4 of the previously mentioned citations were also issued for violation of RBRA Code Section 3.04.010, anchored in a non-anchoring zone. They were anchored within the eelgrass protection zone. This concludes my report. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do any of my colleagues have questions or comments for Harbor Master? Okay, thanks. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for public comment. If there are any members of the public who'd like to speak on either the Executive Director's report or the Harbor Master's report, you're welcome to do that at this time. Anybody online? Okay, so we'll close that and we will move to the consent agenda. Do any of my colleagues have any items they want to pull from the consent agenda? I'm going to pull item 5.3, if that's okay. And are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on any of the items on the consent agenda? Anybody online? No. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda 5.1 and 5.2, items 5.1 and 5.2? All right, move.
Second.
All in favor of point?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks. So those pass 4-0. Item 5.3, I wanted to pull simply because I thought we needed some clarifying language. And let me see if I can find it. Director Gross, do you want to chime in here and help me out so I don't have to scroll through my emails to tell? There was a
Sure. Let me help you there, Chairman Ryan. Chairman, I don't know if I'm supposed to be calling you Vice Chair or Chair. I'm going to give you Chair for this meeting. But Chairman Ryan did point out that he believed there was a bit of confusion on the amendment and the wording of the amendment. Is particularly this amendment increases the amount to be paid to Marin Housing Authority by $1 million, which will cover them through the entire housing program. It was always envisioned that they would be paid $500,000 a year. That not that they're paid, but part of their program, and that's reimbursements for the rents that they're paying for the people that are in the temporary housing support program. It would run about $500,000 a year. The original contract was just that. It was $500,000. It started in 2023, and we didn't run through all of that until basically this month, when we realized that we only had a small amount of money remaining in the contract. So it was envisioned that we would increase that amount, the $1 million. The confusion was on item, the changing of first section, item A5A of the amendment. And it appears to be a bit confusing. And what we decided, or what the chair and with the advice of council decided, is that we would leave section A5A intact. And instead we would add a second section, A.5.B, to read as follows. For the calendar years of 2025, 2026, the total increase will be established at $1 million for a new maximum amount of $1,500,000. That way, there's no confusion on this. We're adding a 1.5 million or another million. It's an additional $1 million for a total amount of $1.5 million.
Yeah, thanks. And let me just to mention to you guys. So the reason I was confused is because the proposed amendment said that they were going to change A5A, and right now it says for 2023, and it tells what we did, and then they would change it and replace it with this 25-26 thing. And I felt like it was a bad idea to sort of wipe out the historical record of what we had done and instead add what we're doing in addition to what we had done. So I know that's a lot to digest on the go, but
Careful reading.
okay. Yeah, okay. So is there any public comment on that particular item, either online or in the chambers? And then can I just move that we pass item 5.3 as amended? Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
All right, and all in favor of that, passing that item?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, great, thanks, that passes 4-0. Thank you, everybody.
And if I could just interject, I will then modify the agreement based on the language that I read out. I had it written down, so I read it as precisely as we agreed, and I'll change the language, and then we'll execute the agreements.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Brad. We'll move now to item 6, which is the discussion items, and we'll start 6.1 is the mid-year budget review. Director Gross.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to shut the video off while I do this. This is I've got 2 long reports. They're very wordy. I apologize for that. But it's important to get this information out. This first report is the mid-year fiscal year 25 mid-year budget review through January. Remember, this is through January 31st, 2025. Because of our meeting schedules, we go back, and usually we present these in January, February, and then we present the budget proposal in April, March, but now we get to put them back to back. And I apologize for having to read all this budget information to you guys back to back, but this is a received report. No action is necessary. This board adopted the RBRA budget for July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025 at its meeting of May 9th, 2024. The adopted fiscal year budget was balanced and provided a nominal increase in member dues of 3% to reflect established staffing goals and priorities, and to continue to implement the provisions of the 2021 agreement between RBRA and BCDC. Under discussion, there have not been any significant budget issues in the first half of this fiscal year, nor are there any pending situations of concern for the remainder of the fiscal year. The revenue accounts are meeting expectations, and they have exceeded expectations in the category of interest earnings. The fiscal year 25 budget contained increased levels of expenses in legal and insurance deductibles. Those expense categories and other expenditure accounts are expected to remain within budget appropriations. Items of note, vessel buyback, the program to purchase vessels owned by individuals relocating to land-based housing was reinstated as of April 13th, 2024. And although not specified in the fiscal year 25 budget, $150,800 or $385 in reimbursement funds from the Environmental Protection Agency grant was made available to support the program. In fiscal year 24, 39,700 of these EPA grant funds were utilized, leaving a balance of 110,685 for vessel buybacks that carried over to fiscal year 25. As of January 31, 2025, all of the EPA grant funds allocated for the buyback program have been expended and reimbursed. Program expenses for the remainder of fiscal year 25 will be supported by the one-time contribution of $100,000 from the County of Marin for vessel buybacks that was included in the agency's fiscal year 24 budget. Funds that remained carried into fiscal year 25 and funds from this contribution that remained at the end of fiscal year 25 will carry over for use in fiscal year 26 and beyond. Staff currently projects that no additional vessel buyback funding will be needed through the conclusion of the program. RBRA's insurance coverage renewed on September 29th, 2024. RBRA's new 2-year policy is budgeted at $77,000 per year, along with new deductibles of $50,000 per case. Claims against the agency have slowed, but not completely. All current cases and some pending should be covered by the previous policy, for which there is no deductible. It's critical that the insurance deductible budget line items remain consistent for the foreseeable future to ensure the agency can fulfill its deductible obligations. Under litigation efforts have lessened over the last 2 years, but it is prudent to keep the agency funding in this category healthy through the conclusion and a few years beyond fulfillment of the BCDC agreement. State Parks, Boating and Waterways Surrender and Abandoned Vessel Exchange Grant, the SAVE grant, $275,000 is budgeted for both grant revenue and expenses in fiscal year 25 and remain consistent with project needs. The program operates on a reimbursement basis, meaning that receipt of grant funds to cover expenditures made in one fiscal year may not occur until the following fiscal year. Additionally, SAVE grant funds that may carry from year to year, may be carried over from one fiscal year to the next until the expiration of the specific grant cycle. Below is a further breakdown of the funding cycle. In fiscal year 25 through January 31, 2025, $198,736 has been reimbursed from the SAVE 22, thus exhausting the remainder of the SAVE 22 grant. The next scheduled reimbursements will be coming from the SAVE 23 grant of $275,000. Staff anticipates receiving $140,000 in reimbursements through the end of fiscal year 25, with the remainder of the grant reimbursement submittals prior to the grant expiration date of September 30th, 2025. Grant funds unused by the expiration date revert to the state for use by other grantees for future grant cycles. Fiscal year 25 final, I see a typo here that I'll have to fix, but it's fiscal year 25. Final revenues, expenditures, and carryover fund balance. Modest savings and expenses at higher than estimated revenue from interest earnings resulted in a positive growth in the agency's fund balance for fiscal year 24 year end. Notable designations and reserves in the fund balance include, my mistake, this is fiscal year 24. I'm confusing myself. It's the first mistake I've made in the last 5 minutes. Excuse me. Insurance deductibles, unspent allocations in each fiscal year, beginning with fiscal year 25, contributes to an increase in the fund balance, which can then be used in the following fiscal years. The vessel buyback program, unspent funds received and reserved for program use can carry over from year to year. Under audit, funds are now allocated for the biannual audit annually so that the funding is consistent from year to year. Contingency reserve, $70,000 as designated in the fiscal year 25 budget and pursuant to the board's reserve policy. And again, for the capital reserves, the same fiscal $20,000 was designated in the fiscal year 25 budget and pursuant to the board's reserve policies. For the fiscal 26 year budget, looking forward to the budget for the year July 1, 2025 to June 30, 2026, staff anticipates the following matters with fiscal impacts. Other grants. Staff has applied for 2 grants to support ongoing activities and programs and anticipates responses later this year. Such support will be critical if federal programs such as the federal EPA grant for eelgrass restoration or the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development are adversely affected by recent changes in the direction to federal agencies. Receipt of grants is typically a zero sum as expenses align with revenues. However, on occasion, staff or other administrative costs may be offset by grant revenues. Insurance deductibles, the new line item, which was included in fiscal year 25 budget. Deductibles will be included in the fiscal year 26 preliminary budget projection. As stated previously, the new liability insurance policy now carries $50,000 deductible per case. The annual expense projections of $50,000 for fiscal year 26 are expected to continue until a few years beyond the completion of the commitments contained in the BCDC agreement, with unspent allocations contributing to fund balance for use in the following fiscal years. Member dues, the staff anticipates only nominal inflation-related increases for fiscal year 26. Under reserves, the agency's fund balance, or the carryover, is building at a sufficiently consistent rate to meet the goals of the agency's reserve policy. The agency's undesignated and unreserved fund balance should be sufficient to support allocations to contingency and capital reserves in fiscal year 26. These reserves are critical to ensure that unanticipated expenses, insurance deductibles, and litigation costs, for example, can be covered by the agency. Without a healthy fund balance and reserves, such unexpected expenses would require member agencies to make unplanned and potentially mid-fiscal year contributions to the agency. When fiscal year 25 concludes and the county budget office reconciles all accounts, staff will return to this board with a recommendation of appropriate amounts to transfer to the designated reserve accounts. Fiscal impact, year-end projections are on track to achieve budgetary goals. Staff is not proposing any budget adjustments at this time, and there are no fiscal impacts of this mid-year budget review. That concludes, and attached is the previously approved fiscal year 25 adopted budget. That concludes my report. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you, Director Chris. Anybody have any questions or comments for?
So I had one question. I'm concerned about the federal monies that we've been relying on. I don't know if it was the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times said now every EPA expenditure over 50,000 has to be approved by DOJ. So what are we planning? I know we have some grants in case we don't get the funding from the federal government. Are there other avenues you're trying to consider if that happens? Because I think it's an expenditure and then you get reimbursed. So if we do the expenditure and don't get reimbursed, it could be a pickle.
That's a great question. Thank you for that. And yes, we've had extensive discussions. Fortunately, our EPA grant is already funded. The one that we're relying on for the eelgrass restoration is already funded. We have an account that we can look at any time just to make sure that the funds are still there. It's a reimbursement grant, and we have a contract on that. We used to do quarterly reimbursement requests. We've changed that to monthly reimbursement requests. I've put all the operating staff on notice that we need to do this, and that if we don't, if the slim chance that things are pulled, we'll have to have a more extensive discussion on how we pay for that. But keeping things on a monthly expense is much more manageable for us. We have applied for two other grants. They are EPA, they are EPA grants, but one of them in particular has already been funded also. So the money is set aside for those purposes. In my executive director report earlier, I mentioned that I've begun discussions with the state on other funding opportunities. And that is, we're looking at that through Senator McGuire's office, who gave us the $3 million for the temporary housing support program, to see if there's some other housing grant opportunities that we can enjoy to help support our temporary housing voucher program. So we are in as much flux and do I say confusion, but not really confusion, where we pretty much have our finger on the pulse, but there's no telling what could happen. And that's why in my report here, and then you'll see in the budget report, I do mention that we're keeping our eye on what's happening with the federal directives that are coming to federal agencies.
Thank you. It's reassuring to know that you are aware of potential issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Carpier's question prompted me to ask Brad, are we able to expedite any of the eelgrass restoration work and make it happen more quickly? And I ask that not only because of the funding situation, but also the potential closure of the Romberg Center, EOS, where I think some of our eelgrass is grown, if I'm not mistaken. Is there, or could we look at that as a way just to spend money faster while we have it?
Thank you for the question, Director Moulton Peters. It's ironic in that I'm sitting here and I have my cell phone, because Rebecca Schwartz-Lessberg just corrected me that the grants that we applied for are NOAA grants and not APA grants. So that's encouraging. But perhaps we could advance some of the work. Of course, we are as concerned about the state's lab shutting down also. It's going to make things a little more challenging for us. But I will definitely bring that up with Rebecca Schwartz-Lessberg from Coastal Policy Solutions to see that what, if anything, can be advanced.
Yeah. And I guess just for the record, my office is in conversation with Romberg about what can be done, and I know others are too. So not giving up yet.
Great, thanks. Do you want to just segue? You kind of talked a little bit about the next year's budget. Do you want to leap right into that now?
I certainly will.
Thanks.
There will be some redundant language. As I said earlier, we usually separate these by a couple of months. So there's some redundant language that you will hear, but let me just get into the fiscal year 26 budget. So this is the fiscal year 25-26 draft preliminary budget. The staff recommends that this board consider the draft preliminary budget for fiscal year 25-26, and after discussion and public comment, adopt resolution 2506, approving the draft preliminary budget for fiscal year 26, and the motion is included. The draft fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget is balanced and reflects progressive implementation of the agreement with the BCDC. The draft preliminary budget shows an anticipated 10% decrease in revenues, exclusive of member agency dues, a cumulative 4% increase in staffing costs over the adopted fiscal year 25 budget, and a cumulative 3% decrease in non-personnel costs. This results in a nominal decrease in total expenditures of $8,901. Balancing the fiscal year 26 budget is achieved by requiring a 3% increase in member agency dues. Under background, each year, the Board of Directors adopts a budget for the next fiscal year that begins July 1 and ends June 30. In developing the fiscal year 26 draft preliminary budget, staff considered the following factors. 1, continued implementation of steps to further transition to a safer, healthier, and well-managed Anchorage, such as those identified in the June 11th, 2020 Transition Plan 2.0. 2, adherence to board-approved RBRA goals and priorities, and continued implementation of the provisions of the 2021 agreement between RBRA and the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. 3, projected annual revenues and expenses for fiscal year 25, and estimated expenses and revenues for fiscal year 26, including grant funding for temporary housing support program, eelgrass protection, management and restoration plan, abatement of marine debris, and abandoned and surrendered vessels. And 4, reliance on member agencies' contributions for a significant portion of RBRA's revenue, recognizing the city and county's budget constraints. The agency's annual budget is the main fiscal planning tool used throughout the year. This is the draft preliminary budget for the period of July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026, and includes an estimated $390,000 in revenue, plus a 3% increase in member agency contributions of $1,166,349. Member agency contributions are based on an anticipated expenditure of $1,556,349, resulting in a balanced budget. Under discussion, sufficient grant funding is currently in place to allow staff and contractors to maintain current progress on projects, and staff will continue to seek grant funds for the management of the anchorage, environmental and eelgrass restoration, implementation of the BCDC agreement, and the disposal of marine debris and abandoned or surrendered vessels as they become available. Coastal Policy Solutions continue to collaborate with staff to implement the existing $2,782,586 grant received from the U.S. EPA, San Francisco Bay Water Quality Improvement Fund, for purposes of restoring at least 15 acres of eelgrass in Richardson Bay and associated outreach, education, habitat monitoring, and ancillary activities. RBRA staff anticipates receiving for the fiscal year 26 budget plan year $250,000 for the surrender and abandoned vessel grant program from the California Division of Boating and Waterways for vessel removal and disposal. Staff plans to utilize an additional $140,000 from previous grant cycles recorded in the approved fiscal year 25 budget. RBRA staff, collaborating with partners at Marin Housing Authority, Marin Health and Human Services, and Episcopal Community Service, continue to administer the temporary housing support program. The THSP is funded via a $3 million state grant award received on March 28, 2023. The grant calls for updates to this board and Senator McGuire's office regularly on the expenditure of funds and the efficacy of the efforts to house the anchor out community. The funds for the THSP are maintained in a separate RBRA Fund 8050 Project 40 RBRA House, managed by the County of Marin Budget Office. This project allows staff to track and report activity utilizing these funds separately from the RBRA baseline budget. To date, approximately $585,000 has been expended from this grant, with an additional $260,000 encumbered for the balance of fiscal year 25. The EPA grant funds remain with the federal government, and RBRA is reimbursed quarterly based on requests from the reimbursement submittal. The project is also maintained and tracked in a separate CMBO managed RBRA Fund 8050 Project 40 RBRA EPA. To date, $781,000 in reimbursements have been received for this project. Both EPA and THSP grant revenues and expenditures were recorded in the fiscal year 24 budget. Therefore, they are not reflected in the fiscal year 26 budget projections. Rather, staff will come back to the board at the beginning of the fiscal year to request carryover forward of the specific amounts unspent or unrealized from fiscal year 25 in RBRA's Fund 8050 projects 40 RBRA House and 40 RBRA EPA. Finally, the staff has applied for 2 grants to support ongoing activities and programs and anticipate responses later this year. Again, just to repeat, those are NOAA grants, not EPA grants. Such support will be critical if federal programs such as the federal EPA grant for eelgrass restoration or the federal Department of Housing and Urban Development are adversely affected by recent changes in direction to federal agencies. Receipt of grants typically is a zero sum as expressed, and expenses align with revenue. However, on occasion, staff or other administrative costs may be offset by grant revenues. If RBRA is successful in the grant application, staff will return to this board for approval and budget adjustments. Vessel buyback program. The category is fully funded for the upcoming year. $100,000 of the $200,000 allocated from fiscal years 23 and 24 budget has been expended. $150,385 in reimbursement funds from the EPA grant was expended in the last month of fiscal year 24 and the first half of fiscal year 25, leaving an estimated carryover balance of $100,000 available to support the program through fiscal year 26. Non-personnel costs, a decrease of 3% in cumulative non-personnel costs is reflected in fiscal year 26 budget projections. Many categories are projected with nominal increases of up to 3%. Some categories remained flat, while 2 categories were decreased. Insurance deductible decreased by 38%, and legals reduced by 25%. As staff projected in the last year's budget report, we are beginning to see a level off of these expenses and believe these trends will continue as the number of vessels remaining on the anchorage continue to decrease. RBRA is now fully staffed and operating efficiently. The fiscal year 26 draft preliminary budget reflects a nominal cumulative increase of 4% over the approved fiscal year 25 budget for personnel. Insurance and deductibles, the expense projection of $50,000 for fiscal year 26 insurance deductible are expected to continue until a few years beyond completion of the commitment contained in the BCDC agreement, with unspent allocations carried over to the following fiscal years. Under reserves, the agency's fund balance or carryover is building at a sufficiently consistent rate to meet the goal of the agency's reserve policy. The agency's undesignated and unreserved fund balance should be sufficient to support allocations to contingency and capital reserves in fiscal year 26. These reserves are critical to ensure that unanticipated expenses, insurance deductibles, and litigation costs, for example, can be covered by the agency. Without a healthy fund balance and reserves, such unexpected expenses would require member agencies to make unplanned and potentially mid-fiscal year contributions to the agency. When fiscal year 25 concludes and the CMBO reconciles all of the accounts, staff will return to this board with a recommendation of appropriate amounts to transfer to the designated reserve accounts. Other notes of interest, as mentioned in the grants section above, EPA, THSP, and SAVE grants have revenues recorded in previous budget cycles. These grants cover multi-years, and expenditures and requests for reimbursements may and often do flow into the following years. The budget process does not allow for the recording of unspent revenues nor anticipated expenses against previously recorded revenues. The actual fund balance can only be recorded and reported at the conclusion of each grant. Any unused grant funds will always revert to the issuing agencies. Therefore, additional planned reimbursable expenses against previous year's revenues are not reflected in the fiscal year 26 draft preliminary budget. For each of these grants, fiscal year 26 reimbursable expenses are planned as follows. EPA, $690,000, THSP, $850,000, and SAVE, $250,000. Under next
So,
steps, the
Can I
adoption.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, Brad? So
Yes,
that just means that, like, for example, the EPA expenditure of 690,000 was recorded in a previous year when we got the grant?
yes.
Thank you.
After adoption of the draft preliminary budget, staff will incorporate changes as directed by the board. We will update any additional information and return to this board with an amended draft budget and final approval. And there are 2 attachments, the draft spreadsheet and the draft resolution. And with that, if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
So sorry, can I go back to that question I just asked? So what happens if the planned amount changes? Like, let's say we only want to spend $590,000 on the EPA. What do we do with the budget with that extra $100,000?
That would then be carried over. If you recall, in July, I brought, you probably don't remember, I remember. We brought 2 staff reports to you on the specific 80/50 budget items, the 40 RBRA EPA and the 40 RBRA house, which we just take whatever's left and remaining and we carry it forward into the next year.
Okay.
So if there's 100,000, it'll add to that. But this is, we like to project and advise the board of what we think we're going to be expending against those grants for the following year.
Yeah, thanks. I was just trying to tie it mentally to the spreadsheet. Thank you. Do I have any questions for Director Gross from my colleagues or comments? Yeah, I appreciate that. And then, but so with this, you're going to come back with a final proposed budget later, right? At the next meeting, is that right?
At the next meeting, I'll be there with a final proposed budget and we'll do elections.
Excellent. At this time, I'd like to open up to the members of the public. If there's anyone in the public who'd like to comment on either the budget review or the proposed budget, now is the time to come forward. Please. So please introduce yourself. I think we know who you are, but introduce yourself and then you have 3 minutes to speak. Thanks.
Hello, board. Hello, Harbor Master and Tab and all the people interested in still the last free anchorage, the tattered remnants of it that I've been on for quite a while. I'm on the 27-foot boat, Jubilee, a sloop. And I feel that this fight that we've fought for quite a while to remain a free anchorage is nearing the end of an era, for sure, like the IJ and the Pacific Sun and the Chronicle say, that I talked about a small craft harbor district, and that would have had to have been approved by the Board of Supervisors. And since Stephanie Moulton Peters is sitting on this RBRA board, that would have been a stretch. That the culture and the people and the boats and the fun we've had and the whole history of this place has been amazing benefit for my life. And that the idea that we're going to keep a spot over mud and claim that as ours forever or as long as our boat's around or we're alive seems not right, that nobody can own the water. Not the anchor outs, not the RBRA, not the state of California, not Sausalito or Mill Valley. So I don't want to fight anymore. I can't do it. Everything in me says that it's not a fight that we can win, and that people that are sailors, specifically me, are not here for the duration. We're here to get our boats ready and to sail to other places. And if this happens, the same thing that's happening on Rainbow Bay happens every place around the world, that might make it more difficult for people who are in marinas in San Francisco Bay to be able to sail other places as well. I appreciate the housing, and now I've heard from Brad Gross that he said temporary housing voucher. And this was promised to the 22 people that are now on this as a permanent voucher. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen that we can't necessarily predict in the federal government, in the state government, and the local government. And I don't want to see anybody that has, in good faith, turned in their boats and gotten housing kicked out because the funding is gone. I don't think that you can guarantee it. I don't think anybody can guarantee that this is going to continue. But I understand the good faith that you've given to enable people to come off the water that couldn't be on the water anymore, people that were too old, people who weren't on navigable boats and all of that. So I want to say thank you for that. And I want to say thank you for the people on the Anchorage who put the pressure on the government to enable this to happen. That if we would have just sat back and let whatever happened happen, that it might not be working out the way it's working out. So everybody that's deciding that they want to turn in their boats and get housing, I understand that. And it seems that I might be that as well. I'm not looking for housing right now, but you know, this is almost an offer. It seems like an offer I can't refuse for my $100 boat that I got from my friend, the Admiral. So it's bittersweet. That's how I feel. And that people describe this as a cycle, that there would be pressure on the Anchorage and then the pressure would be relieved and then there would be pressure again and then that would be relieved. So the number of boats would go up and down. But now it's not the same. But there are a lot of things going on in the political world that are not the same as well. So on this eve of Purim, where a man named Mordecai would not bow down to the prime minister that worked for the king Artaxerxes. And because of that prime minister, a very evil man, decided that not only the man who wouldn't bow down and kneel before him would be punished, but all of his people. And the line is, it says, "There's a certain people scattered and separate among the peoples throughout the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws differ from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws. It is therefore of no use for the king to let them be. If it pleases the king, let it be written to destroy them. I will weigh out 10,000 silver talents into the hands of those who perform the work." So it seems to me that maybe Mordecai could have crossed his fingers and pretended to bow down to this man. And this whole episode would not have happened, but of course it did happen. And that I really care about the people that are going to remain on the Anchorage. And we have lived a different life. We've lived with many, if not most, voluntary poverty. We've lived closer to the birds and the fish and the seals and the air, and that environmentally, we're the first responders. We know about the cormorant population. We know about the herons and the seagulls and all of that. And to mediate the eelgrass issue is not going to be a complete answer to the environmental issues that are happening on this small part of the world. So I wanted to say that. And so I have gratitude towards you for understanding our situation. And I still love deeply all of my friends that remain on the Anchorage. So thank you and good night.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Chase.
Director Chair, Chair Ryan, there's one speaker online, Arthur Bruce.
Okay. Yeah, please welcome Mr. Bruce.
Mr. Bruce, you should be able to speak now.
Hello, Board of Directors. How's everybody this evening? Yeah, I'd like to echo what Jeff said and
Excuse me for a second, Mr. Bruce, you're kind of garbled. Can you adjust the microphone or something so we can hear you a little more clearly?
can you hear me okay now?
Sort of, but not great.
I don't know what I can do to fix it. Well, if you can hear me, I'll just try to make this short.
Yeah, we can hear you, sort of.
I was curious why my vessel appears on the grant application for the boats and waterways grant. If anybody could address that.
I don't have the information, but I can ask staff if they have the information, or you can contact them outside of the meeting. Probably the best way to do that. But look, after
Okay,
public
I'll s-
comment, I'll ask staff, okay? If you just want to hang.
okay, I'll send another email. And did you guys receive the emails I sent earlier today? It was kind of late, but
Yeah, yes, thank you.
okay. That's just that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bruce. Sorry, is there anyone else in the chambers who wants to speak? We're actually talking about the budget item. Okay, thanks. So I'll close that and bring it back to the board. Is there any discussion, or do we want to have a motion to approve the resolution and accept the budget?
I have no comment, but can approve the resolution for the budget.
Yep, I've got it.
Yeah, so it's to adopt the resolution, which adopts the.
Adopt the
preliminary draft.
resolution to adopt the preliminary draft.
Okay. Is
I-
that, do
I
I have a
second that.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
A lot of adoption.
Yes, a lot of adopting. All in favor of Director
Aye.
Carpier's motion, say aye. Aye. All right, that passes 4-0. Thank you. Now we move on. So the next regular board meeting will be held May 8th at 5:30 PM. It is scheduled to be here. I'm sorry to say, Mr. Mitchell, but this is the space we have, but I appreciate your comments and we will look into that. Do we have any board member comments? General board member comments?
One
Yeah, please.
that I'd like to just ask staff, I'd like to understand Mr. Mitchell's situation a little better, and so we can take that offline, Brad. But he did give us quite a commentary tonight, so just like to understand it better. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll do a little research and get back to you.
And can we also follow up with Mr. Bruce on his question that he asked? Great. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
I appreciate that. But with that, the meeting is adjourned. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you.